Welcome back to episode 7 of Project X, where we're taking you on a journey with us to find private label product opportunities. I'm your host, Bradley Sutton from Helium 10. This bearded gentleman to my left is
Tim Jordan from the Private Label Legion.
Now, if you would like a detailed written version of this episode, make sure to go to helium10.com/X7. That's helium10.com/X7. We've got a question before we get started here. What countries, if you're already selling on Amazon, what countries have you sourced from? Where have you gotten your products produced? USA, China, India, somewhere else? Let us know in the comments below. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, the very first thing I want to talk about is a 3-letter, what do you call those things? Acronyms?
Acronym.
A 3-letter acronym that we've heard Tim talk about in different episodes, and it was kind of a new acronym for me. It's RFQ. So can you explain a little bit again what this is?
Yeah, so this is the request for quote, the RFQ. And the reason the RFQs are important, well, there's a lot of reasons. One, it helps with our communication, because no matter who or how or where we're sourcing, we have to have clear communication. It also helps us organize internally. So if I'm having a random thought, hey, I want to find this coffin box, or hey, I want to find this egg tray, or this, forest axe, there's a lot of things in my head that maybe I haven't put down on paper yet and organized. Maybe there are things that I need to make sure I'm covering as far as, different, parts or components of this that when I actually reach out to the supplier, I might have forgotten. So I like to put together a very, very simple form, all right? Now, I will say this. We've put together a very simple one just to show you how easy this could be. Sometimes I have seen RFQs that are 7 pages long. We're going to keep this really simple. So I've got just a very, very simple Excel template here with just some basic questions. So Bradley, if you pull that up,
sure.
And what we'll do is kind of dissect this a little bit. Remember, there's a lot of really, really complex maneuvers and things that we can do here in this private label industry. But for all intents and purposes of Private Label Project X, we're keeping it extremely simple. We're keeping it simple enough that you're not going to get bogged down on all these, crazy difficulties. If we show you this and you have some questions or comments about, hey, what about, a different piece of information for this RFQ, or you have a question about it, just comment in the show notes, reach out to us. We can talk about those things. But for all intents and purposes, this is kind of the basic stuff. So this is literally a 5-minute build out in Excel. You can do something like this, something very simple. So just a request for quote. Of course, we've got the date. Obviously, that's self-explanatory. Requested by. So this one was requested by me. So if you have a staff member, if you have a VA, if you have a partner, make sure that they know who this is coming from. And that's largely for the supplier, right? Because they need to be able to organize who they're talking to. All right. Email. So this is my email. This is either my WeChat or WhatsApp. You should probably be familiar with those. If you're not, these are just texting apps. WeChat is, I think, the largest chat platform in the world, largely because it's Chinese based. So a lot of suppliers will use things like WeChat. And this is how they can contact me. So when I send this RFQ out, it might go out to a lot of people, and they need to be able to, in one form, see how to contact me, okay? Notes, this can be anything. This can be anything like, hey, this is our second request, or hey, this is version 3 of this product, or this could be even something that you might print off, because I like paper. Obviously, I'm a paper guy. So I might print this off and make notes to myself in this block of who I sent this to, what suppliers I sent it to. So the general name of the product. Look, this seems self-explanatory, but this is such an easy thing to mess up. Remember that our suppliers, if they're internationally, and that's what we're really talking about today, are having to translate things. So it might be more difficult for them to try to come up with a name of a product that we send a picture to. So by us defining what this name is, that actually can eliminate a lot of issues and make things very simple. I go to China a lot and source, and there are little things like, flasks, like a whiskey flask. And I've gotten a quote on those before, and they named the product wine pot, right? So by us naming this will help eliminate a lot of confusion. The quantity requested. Remember, we don't get to make all the demands, so I'm putting my preference or their MOQ. So I'm going to say, I'm requesting 500 units for this, or the MOQ, because they might come out and say 2,000 units, right?
And just to make sure everybody understands, we got another acronym here,
yep.
MOQ.
MOQ is minimum order quantity. And this might be a situation where they, look at my request and they say it's not worth it to us to make 500, but the MOQ would be 2,000. So we're going to require you to purchase at least 2,000 units. Now, the reason that I also do this, like I give them an option, is a lot of times these suppliers will see this RFQ and say, oh, 500 units, I'm not interested. And they'll just ignore you. They'll throw it away. They say, if their requested quantity is 500, we don't want to do business, then they'll just kind of push you off to the side and you never hear back from them. But by giving them an option, and we'll talk more about relationships later, by giving them an option, they will at least feel empowered to respond to you, right? So all of this is just an information gathering stage. What if we requested 500, but we'd be willing to buy 1,000 and their MOQ is 1,000? If we didn't give them an option, then we might never hear from them again. We missed that opportunity. So general description of product, this is pretty self-explanatory. This could go into pages and pages and pages, but keep it simple if you can. So if you noticed, I said pictures attached for reference. So when we email this out, we also send pictures. Say we're looking for items similar. Items need to be of good quality. Please add the hanging hardware. Remember when we were doing our research in the last episode, we talked about little hanging hardware, and we might send a picture of that, little metal thing you put on the back of the picture frame. Matte black paint. Units will be packaged separately for retail sale. This is important because if I just ask for coffin boxes and they say, sure, I'll make you 500 coffin boxes, what if we didn't tell them we wanted individual boxes or packaging for all of them? If you don't say it, you can't assume that they're going to know it. So what may happen is we do a product inspection later and we've got 500 loose coffin boxes. And then we say, well, I wanted a box. And they say, well, you didn't tell us that. So add as many details as you can right here. And then we're going to tell them, hey, we want you to supply a 3-inch by 5-inch sticker to each box, and the picture or file is attached in whatever we send this. This is important too, because remember, they might send us a quote and then later we say, oh, can you also put a sticker on it? And they say, sure, but it's 20 cents more, right? So now this is like eliminating all this communication because we know exactly what we want and we're telling them exactly what we want. And the way that we learn and the way we process information, by us writing it down, we can review this before we send it off and we realize, oh, there's other things that I forgot about, right? So it takes a little bit of work to this RFQ, but it keeps us organized. Dimensions of product, this is important. So 14 inches tall, 7.5 inches wide, and 3.5 inches deep. Over communicate here. We in the US use the standard system, so inches, feet, miles. Nobody else in the world does. If I didn't say inches right here, they're probably going to think centimeters, right? So over communicate. I put tall, wide, deep. If I just put 14 by 7.5 by 3.5, they don't know how that's shaped, and they don't know if this is millimeters, centimeters, or inches. They have no idea. So again, over communicate. Requested materials. Remember, the suppliers that we're reaching out to are truly the experts. So just because I think I know what it needs to be made out of, we'll let them offer some suggestions. So I know a little about production, so I know it should be plywood, OSB, MDF. These are all panels. Or suggestions. They may come back and say, hey, we can actually do pine or hardwood that's not even like a pressed particle board. So let them communicate, some options to you, essentially. Packaging specifications. We're going to say we want a cardboard box, maybe bubble wrap on the interior. So we would wrap bubble wrap around the product, then put it in a box.
In those reviews, a lot of the negative reviews we talked about in last episode were like, oh man, this thing got arrived damaged. So
banged up, scratched. Yeah. So again, we're using that information that we talked about last episode to build the RFQ. I'm going to say it again. 3.5-inch sticker on the outside. It should have been 3.5 or 3 by 5, but you get the point. Shipping requirements. We will get shipping quote later, but we need these case packaged for transport. Guys, this is important because, and we'll talk about this in our shipping episode, which is episode 8, but we're going to let them know that you don't have to give us a shipping quote right now because they probably don't know what that shipping quote is going to be. Shipping quotes change. They don't even know exactly how big and heavy the cartons or cases might be for this. So don't get, I'm only saying that now so you don't get hung up on the RFQ process in asking for numbers that they really can't give you right now, right? And then we're going to specify we need these case packaged for transport. Otherwise, we might have our freight forwarder or somebody go to the factory and pick these things up. And like I said before, we specified we wanted individual boxes, and there's 500 boxes sitting on the floor. We didn't specify case packed. Now, most suppliers will know that, but again, never leave anything up for interpretation. Let's make sure that we're over communicating, right? We know that we're explaining them we want a coffin box, and we're going to send them pictures. We're going to send them specifications, and we'll show you that in just a second. But also, if you're replicating other products, send them links. So similar products are linked. I literally said search Amazon.com for, this is the ASIN for the purple one, right? Because the more information they can see, the more accurate their quote and production is going to be. So even though we've given a lot of this information already, send them to the Amazon listing. Say, hey, I want that, but I want it in matte black, right? Give them as much information. There are a lot of times we'll find Google Images, we'll find things on Etsy, Pinterest, and in an RFQ, I might put 6 or 7 links. That's why I put other links here, right? And then variations or other notes. In this section, of course, we don't have anything. This is where I might list, hey, we want 3 different sizes and or different colors. And really for those, we might actually do a whole new RFQ, but we might put some notes there. So Bradley, any questions about this? Is this pretty self-explanatory?
Pretty self-explanatory. I would say maybe almost under the shipping requirements, like you got to be careful too, especially with the coffin boxes a little bit larger. You might almost want to specify, hey, don't go above these dimensions, because like, let's say you're having things shipped to a 3PL, we'll talk about that in future episodes, or maybe your house, first, and then you're going to send it to Amazon. Well, to Amazon partner carriers have limitations, and you're going to get charged a lot more if it's like above certain dimensions. So again, if you leave it too open-ended, you don't want to end up with a box. Yeah, we package it in the case, but it's like the size of a whole pallet,
Yep.
Then that means you're going to have to break it all down once it gets here. So if you do have oversized items, make sure that you know what the Amazon requirements are for the case size, and then you'll be able to make sure that to communicate that to them so that they keep it under those dimensions.
Yep. So again, with these RFQs, keep them simple. Make sure that they look professional. One problem is when we send out these RFQs to suppliers, if we don't look professional, they might not take us seriously. Because remember, they're having to validate us as well. Is this someone that I want to take the time to give a quote to? Is this someone that I want to take the time to work with? So when you do something like this, you're setting yourself above your other potential, competition that's also maybe reaching out to similar factories. And they'll kind of give you a little priority if you look really professional, because they kind of assume it's going to be worth their time to work with. All right, now the other thing that you have to remember is the RFQ probably shouldn't just be a standalone document. You should have other things with it. Now remember in my description, I said pictures are attached. So when I have this document or this sheet or whatever this form is, I'm going to have other things that I might attach or to send with it. So for us, remember we sent the ASIN so they can look it up, but we also want to make absolutely sure they have a picture of this thing. So we're going to send a picture. So Bradley, if you would pop this up, you guys can see. Very simple picture, right? Pretty self-explanatory. And then also remember that as part of the specification for the packaging especially, we wanted a 3-inch by 5-inch label. Now, my suggestion on that label is to go ahead and send them a rough design of that now, like this. And the reason that we do that is they need to know if it's color, what type of label this is going to be. If they have this information now, they can get it quoted. So remember, we came up with Manny's Mysterious Oddities of its brand. So this is super simple. It's just a 3-inch by 5-inch PDF label. You can get these made on Fiverr, Upwork, a virtual assistant. You might make these yourself.
Is that supposed to be Manny right there?
I'm not exactly sure what that is or isn't supposed to be, but my designer threw that up. It looked really good. So again, remember, this is just for fun. You would, of course, brand yourself a little bit differently, but this is just for fun. So we've got Manny's Mysterious Oddities. We got a little funny catch line there, curating the curious. I thought that was pretty good. Couple things that you need to note. Made in China. We'll talk about this in shipping, but make sure on your labels or packaging that you're specifying made in China. That's a legal requirement, and if you don't put it in now, you might have to add stickers later, which is an extra cost. And then also remember, everything that we sell on Amazon has to have a barcode so they can scan it. Now that can be the FN SKU. You can also sell products with a UPC number. Now remember, we set our products up with a UPC number, and I'm actually putting that on this label. The reason I'm doing that is it's less expensive. I'm not going to have a brand label and a UPC code. And if we have to do the UPC or FNSKU code on the package already, we might as well put it together with something like this, which actually looks better and more professional. It doesn't cost anything more to design it. So sending in the RFQ, attach it with this type of label, send it with a picture of the product, and then that should be enough that your suppliers can run with it. If they have any questions, they'll ping you back. But that's pretty much the RFQ, is a form and whatever kind of accessorial or complementary documents or images you might send with them.
Now, once we do actually, have the final copy of this image, for example, what format can factories usually take it in? Do they have like special requirements or something?
It can get really complicated, but normally if it's just a simple sticker, like a standalone sticker, it can be a PDF.
Okay.
If it's a logo that you want customized on your product or customized on very specific packaging, they might need like a vector file or an AI file. So you can ask your supplier, when you get down more to the details of what type of file format they need. But generally, if we're just doing a simple sticker, and remember, for this case study, we're just keeping it simple, we're keeping it basic. This is all we're going to do on it. And once we get this supplied, assuming we find a supplier for this, you'll see exactly what this looks like. It should be just a cardboard box with a sticker on it, which is perfectly good enough for Amazon.
All right, thanks, Tim, for letting us know all about the RFQ. We got a lot of great information there. Now, the next step I would assume is, hey, where are we actually going to source this from? We asked that question at the outset. Those of you who do have products on Amazon, what kind of countries have you sourced from? So let me ask you that question, Tim. What countries have you sourced from, and what do you suggest that we do for this project?
Well, let me start with your second question. What do you suggest? There's really no wrong answer. Remember, it's a big, giant world out there. There's a lot of different places to source from. There's a lot of different places that will work for one person but not another. There's always tons of options. Personally, I've sourced from China. I've sourced from the US. We've sourced from third world countries like Central America, Haiti. We're sourcing right now in India. We're kind of going all over the globe. There's tons of options. But currently, I still think that the easiest place and probably the most available place to find a wide selection of products is China. And I know there's a lot of people that have, varying opinions. Like I said, there's a million different answers. But for our case study, because I feel like it is probably still the simplest place to do business with, we're going to go ahead and say China.
So my question obviously would be like, well, why China for this one? How many percent of other applications that our viewers might see would you recommend China? Like, why would you choose China? Why would you not choose China?
Yeah, that's, again, a big question. I'll try to tackle some of this. The truth is, most of the products in the world right now are being made in China. China, I would even say decades ago, started really focusing on manufacturing. And to be honest, they're pretty good at it. There's some junk that you can get out of China, just like any other country, but some of the most technologically advanced manufacturing processes are in China. Their industry is really, really heavily supported. Their logistics system is good. So the truth is, because China produces really more goods than most anywhere else in the world, almost combined, it is actually easier to find the products that we want. So for simplicity, it's really good. Another thing that China does very well is they have, again, this logistics system set up well for us. Generally, they're very good at exporting. The exporting procedures or processes are pretty simple. Communication is pretty well established. Internal infrastructure, shipping things around, exporting, importing, all of that is pretty well established. So really, China's pretty easy. Now, there are a lot of considerations to think about with China that, we could get very complex with, and that may be something good for the AMA if there's some specific questions. But let's address some of the top ones that I see. Right now, there's a lot of talk about the tariffs and trade war in China. Now, tariffs have gone up on some products. That's the absolute truth. I know a lot of people whose businesses have really been affected negatively because of this increased duty that they have to pay or the tariffs they have to pay with their products coming in. But I can tell you with absolute certainty, it has not affected the way that I've sourced at all from China. Not at all. And the reason for that is the products that we source using these methods to find them that we're showing you right now have such high profit margins that it doesn't matter. So if our cost of a $3 item increases from 0% duty to 25% duty, and that duty is applied to our purchase cost, that's only 75 cents a unit.
Is that kind of like the rule of thumb? Like obviously every single, depending on the material is how these tariffs are done, or what kind of product it is, what category is what percentage is put on it. But what's a good rule of thumb? It's like 25% kind of an average, or?
Yeah, products are categorized by a number, like a product number. And that number is recognized universally. And on that catalog of numbers, essentially, there's very, very few items, very few that are over 25%. The majority of products that would apply to like e-commerce sellers like us are anywhere from about 2% up to about 18% right now is the average. So there are a few items at 25 cents. There are 25%. There are a few things that are much higher, but generally speaking, it's not that big of a deal. And we get your quotes and then we get your shipping quotes. That's one thing that we'll look at a little bit later is calculating those duties. But for all intents and purposes, we don't want to be looking at something that should have a very small effect on our product selection because we should have very high margins. So again, tariffs and duties are something that we need to keep our eye on, keep aware of. It hasn't stopped what we're doing in China because it really hasn't been that big of a deal to us, and our margins are so high that we can absorb that. So not like a deal breaker. Don't be scared of China right now.
Okay, so we're decided we're going all in on China for this Project X. What's the next step? How do we start looking for who we're going to get this product from?
Yeah, so now that we know we're going to China, we need to talk about how we engage with suppliers. So there's a lot of different ways to source from China. The most common is
Alibaba.
Alibaba. So let's pull up Alibaba.com and let me do just kind of a brief tutorial on Alibaba. Now, you guys have seen Alibaba in this case study before. We talked about it a little bit in product validation to make sure that products aren't saturated. And Alibaba does a really, really good job of coming across as a very, very slick, polished sales platform, essentially, right? But is Alibaba a sales platform? No. Alibaba is the most complex and sophisticated phone book in the world, okay? Alibaba is not a sales platform. Alibaba is just a business directory. Now, Jack Ma, when he had the idea and the vision for this that became Alibaba, it really was just a business directory. It was ways for people throughout the world to find manufacturers specifically in China. Since then, it's spread out to a lot of different countries. You can use Alibaba to search almost all over the world. There's even US manufacturers that advertise on Alibaba right now. But if you think of Alibaba as a phone book, we know how to basically engage with it. And if we make sure that we're aware it's not a marketplace, it's not actually a sales platform, then that's going to simplify some other things that we're going to talk about later, okay? So let's just level set. This is just a business directory, but it's one that we can use. So, of course, it has a search function, and the way the search function works is not necessarily helping us find a product. It's helping us find a manufacturer that can sell that product. So because we're doing coffin shelf, let's go ahead and type in coffin shelf here and just see what comes up. Now, what's interesting here with this Alibaba is it's kind of a mixed bag of good news and bad news. And we've talked about this. We actually showed you the search before when we were looking at, potential saturation. We don't see any coffin shelves on here. All right. It's not there. It doesn't exist. Now, that's great because we don't have a saturation problem potentially, but it's also bad because how are we going to find this, potential supplier? Now, we didn't go to Alibaba to actually find the coffin shelf. We came to find a supplier. So if we look at these listings, this is very different than Amazon because, there's a product, but more importantly is a supplier. All right. So they make this, wooden cup tree, but look, wooden crafts company. They make wooden crafts. It has supplier information here. You can contact the supplier. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. If we just keep scrolling down and looking for something, nothing's really popping up. Again, that's a good thing. But let's be thinking about a manufacturer that can make this as opposed to looking for the actual product. So if you would please, sir, type in something like small bookshelf. Because if we think of the product itself, this is kind of what it is,
Is
right?
bookshelf one or two words?
I don't know. It autofilled to one word, so we're good. All right, so what we do here is get creative. Remember, we're talking about creativity. Now, it's interesting if you look on this page, a lot of these are large bookshelves, obviously, but check this out. Over off to the side, it looks like a mail organizer, right? So looking at this, I might think, hey, they're making a small wooden, paneled item. They might be a potential supplier. Let's keep scrolling. It looks like a lot of large bookshelves.
Yeah, the Alibaba search algorithm might not be as advanced as the Amazon search algorithm because even though we put small.
So let's do this. Remember, there are some keywords for desktop bookshelf. Let's try that.
Do I still put small?
Kill small.
All right. Desktop bookshelf. Getting a little closer.
Getting a little closer. Some of these are smaller. So essentially what we could do is we're basically scanning through here and cruising through here. See, like here's a small one. This is a desktop one, small panels. So, again, when we're finding a product that's not saturated, it might be harder to find a supplier, but that's great because other people are getting discouraged. Other people are not really, feeling confident about this, so they might move on. So because there's nobody on Alibaba that specifically makes this product that we can find, that's why we have the RFQ, right? The RFQ, remember I said it's important to put the pictures, it's important to put all the specifications, because now we're going to have to reach out to suppliers that might not already be making that product, right? So you understand the importance now of having very clear expectations. So what we can do is we can go in here and click on really any of these listings. Like I'll click on here, and they make it extremely easy to contact the supplier, okay? We know all the information about the factory here, so we can contact supplier, and that's easy. That's as easy as it is. We can put in product details here and say, we're looking for, a product, please check the attached files. And then all we have to do is go down here to add attachment, and that's where all those files go that, remember, we built out. So we've got the RFQ, we've got the label design, we've got a picture of the product, we've got the dimensions, all of that information. I can go in 30 minutes and fire this off to 40 or 50 potential suppliers. That's all it takes. It's fairly simple. Now, let me also say this. This is kind of a hot topic about Alibaba. You have to be careful what information you're taking as gospel truth on Alibaba. All right? Remember, this is just a phone book, so they can say pretty much anything they want to. They can say things like, this is a MOQ and this is a price, right? Those are not always related. A lot of people think, oh, I can buy 50 units for $4 a piece. Not necessarily true. It means they'll sell you as low as 50 units and as low as $4. So don't get hung up on this. Don't get angry when numbers come back different, because they might not sell you 50 units at $4, but they might sell you 2,000 units at $4 or 50 units at $7, right? So again, this is just a marketing platform. This is not a sales platform. Also, there's a lot of other information. Like it shows they've been here for 1 year. They're a gold supplier.
Do you personally when you're looking on Alibaba just for different factories, do you have any kind of minimum guidelines for yourself?
I don't, because a lot of these are subjective, and a lot of these are actually just marketing, like kind of bans. You can manipulate this, right? So I don't trust this. I don't necessarily distrust it, but I don't worry about that. What I worry about is just finding the initial potential supplier here. I don't go any deeper than that on Alibaba. It's just a phone book, and we'll talk about how we vet some of those suppliers here in just a few minutes. So Alibaba is great for what it's for, but don't think that it's more than what it is. So just as an example, I want to check this out. Wooden egg tray. Let me show you an example of products that you could potentially find. There you go. So now we do have some suppliers that are potential candidates. I like that some of these are not completely, relevant. There's some kind of weird stuff on here, which is good, because remember we said we didn't want to just see mountains and mountains of results because it could be potentially saturated. But this is a good indicator that, hey, at least people are making these. Now, what we could do is we could start reaching out to these suppliers and talking about our RFQ specifically for the egg trays, which we haven't shown you yet.
That's an ad. It is trying to get like Amazon. I see that right there.
Yeah.
It says that's a sponsored ad.
So this is an ad. And keep in mind, remember I told you that the MOQ, minimum order quantity, and the pricing are not necessarily related. That's why this price is so different. And the reason that price is different, they might say, hey, we can do a 4-hole egg tray, or we can do a 60-hole egg tray, or different quantities will affect the pricing. Again, I'm not getting too deep into that. Don't get hung up on that. All I'm going to do, we just made them pay for that click, is go to contact supplier, send the RFQ. So I hope that I'm explaining well why it is so important to have the RFQ. Otherwise, we might get hung up on all these little details that don't matter. Just find a supplier, send the RFQ. That's it. Another way that we like to find potential products, personally my favorite, is through sourcing agents. Sourcing agents are a valuable asset. I love relationships. I love people that know more than I do. I love people that have the inside track. And sourcing agents are the way to find those. There are sourcing agents in every country for every product all around the world. It's a huge industry. Up until recently, I owned my own sourcing company in China, and we had a team of sourcing agents that worked for private label sellers finding their products. And that's what we were very, very good at. We had these personal relationships. We didn't even advertise on Alibaba. People just came to us through other places. Now, the way that sourcing agents typically work is they're normally going to charge a commission. Okay, and that scares a lot of people. But remember, you get what you pay for, right? So if I have to pay an extra, few percentage, 3% or 5%, that's kind of industry standard in China, extra on top of a product. So for every dollar I spend, I have to give them 3 or 5 cents. That could be potentially very valuable because now we've got someone that could negotiate the prices lower for us. They can find factories that we'd never find anywhere else. Remember, there's just millions of factories literally in China, millions of manufacturers that aren't even listed online. So sourcing agents can help you. And it's also really nice to have boots on the ground in China.
And remember, there's been this stigma over the years, like, oh man, we need to go direct to the factory. And that's okay. If you have a relationship directly with a factory owner, you visit the factory, we'll talk about that maybe a little later, but that's important. But don't think that, trading companies, sourcing agents, these are middlemen, they're just gonna ramp up the prices, because there's a lot of advantages of doing that. Like Tim said, boots on the ground, they speak the language. They also have a lot of more buying power. We're just one person making one order of 200 or 400 coffin shelves. But if a sourcing agent goes to a factory, they have a relationship with that factory. And that factory owner knows that this sourcing agent probably could bring them a lot of business. At the same time, another thing that people are worried about sometimes is, oh man, what if this factory goes and kind of like backdoors my product, or they want to go sell it on Amazon, themselves, just you dealing with them, they might not care if they lose your business because they're going to make a lot of money on selling their own coffin shelf, right? But if it's a sourcing agent, they're not going to want to burn that kind of bridge, because again, if they piss off that sourcing agent or that trading company, that means they're potentially going to lose all of the business from them. So don't just think that, oh my goodness, I can only deal with the factory directly. I don't want these middlemen, because sometimes that 2, 3, 4% commission is definitely worth it in the long run.
Yeah, so again, there's not just one right way of doing this. We're showing you a lot. You can source yourself through Alibaba. You can find sourcing agents. One of my personal favorite, and one that I've been doing, helping other sellers with for a long time, is actually going to China. And this is awesome, and I'll tell you some different reasons for this. One is, I told you, relationships are really, really important. So when I first started going to China years and years ago to source, that's what I did, is I shook a lot of hands, and it opened up a lot of doors for me. I was able to find products and product opportunities that nobody else has ever seen online. I was able to launch very unique products. But now I literally have personal relationships with people that nearly every day I'm getting WeChat messages from these, personal friends. Hey, Tim, here's a cool product for you. I can message them and say, hey, can you find this for me? And going to China was really, really important because it allowed me to learn a lot about, the manufacturing and the culture, but also start building these relationships. Now, my company takes people to China on sourcing trips. And what we do there is we take them to giant markets. The biggest markets in China are Canton Fair and Yiwu. Yiwu, it's spelled Y-I-W-U. And you can literally go for a few days and meet potentially, tens of thousands of suppliers. And this is cool because if we had a product like the egg tray, I might stick one of those things in my luggage and carry it over there and show people, hey, can you make this? Can you make this? Can you make this? Now, what's really cool about that is you'll meet people in person that you wouldn't find online. Mm-hmm. You're starting a relationship with them directly, which, as we said, is very, very valuable and important. And they know that you're serious. So they're more likely to give you better terms or better pricing or better speed, because they're like, hey, if they came all the way over here, these folks mean business. So it is very, very possible that the best way for you to succeed in finding a supplier is potentially going to one of these large markets, going and kind of learning boots on the ground. That's another great opportunity and great way to do this. And again, we're talking about China, but this can be worldwide. I'm going to India later this year, where I'm going to a giant market. And the reason for it is I want to find suppliers. I want to learn what types of products are best made in India. And I want to network with other sellers and experts so I can learn. So, I've sourced in a lot of different countries. There's a lot of other people using, all over Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Taiwan, Bangladesh. So again, we're using China as an example, but all of these methods are still the same, whether it's online like Alibaba, through sourcing agents, or through, a physical market. And one reason that we're telling you so many different ways to engage with suppliers is because it's so important to go wide but not deep. And what we mean is you need to really cast out like a very large net of potential suppliers. If we just went on Alibaba and we sent our RFQ to one person and they didn't respond, oh great, 2 days later we're trying to find another one. So I'm going to fire off as many as I can. So a lot of times I'll send out RFQs on Alibaba, I'll call sourcing agents, and whenever I go to China, I'm also trying to source that same product. So when you really cast out a wide net, you could find a lot of potential suppliers. The pricing gets very competitive, and I also start building up those, big lists of relationships that I have. So go wide but not deep. So I guess the next thing we talk about is communication.
Yeah, so communication, you talked about, there's a chat feature, there's a messaging feature right here on Alibaba. There's WeChat. I mean, WeChat, I think in Chinese it's called Weixin, but there's literally almost nothing done in China outside of WeChat. They use it to pay. I was doing a demonstration for Helium 10, but instead of doing like a Zoom webinar or a GoToWebinar, it was literally on WeChat. Like everything they do is on WeChat. So that is an absolute must to have if you're dealing with China. WhatsApp. Different countries have different platforms. Know what country, like a lot of people in Latin America use WhatsApp instead of WeChat. If you're sourcing in Korea, the app is Kakao Talk. There's different apps around the world. China, we're gonna definitely use WeChat.
Yeah, email is important too. A lot of them will start with email. There's also like email translation services like QQ, which is important because we need to understand that when we're talking about communication, no matter what platform we use, whether it's WeChat or email or QQ or whatever, most of the time we don't know multiple languages. All right, Bradley, you're smarter than I am. You know a lot of different languages. I don't. I've dabbled. It's horrible. You don't want to hear me try. So I know that when I'm communicating with Chinese suppliers, they're doing a lot more work than I am on the communication because they're having to translate, all right? So no matter how I'm communicating, whether it's RFQ, and you saw how simple that is, or my text messages or voice notes even, I'm extremely clear, I'm extremely articulate, I don't use overcomplicated words, I don't use slang, I don't use euphemisms, I probably wouldn't use an acronym like RFQ, I would say request for quote. And one thing that we learned to do is to say things multiple different ways. So I tell people all the time, like on training that we do, say things twice. And here's what I mean by that. I'll give you a really good example. We were sourcing some lamps, all right? We're talking light fixtures. They're small light fixtures that, sit on a desk or sit on an end table. And there's multiple variations of them. So for all intents and purposes, we'll say different colors. So we were working with a supplier and we're saying, hey, what color lamps are available? And they said white. And we said, and this is, because the time difference, every communication is like a day. And we're like, well, we know you have white, but we also saw other colors. We don't remember what they were. And this is something we found at EWOO, a physical market on one of our sourcing trips. And we're talking to the supplier, following up. We're saying, well, what other colors do you have? They said, we don't have other colors, just white. And I messaged back and I said, I know that I saw several samples of different colors. What color lamps can you sell us? They said, white. And I was going crazy. I'm like, what are these people talking about? I don't understand this. What I later found out is that the translation for lamp into Chinese translates to light bulb. All right. And I know that like in Europe, a light bulb is called a lamp. And it was my fault. I wasn't communicating things in a way that, was replicating itself, so I couldn't understand it. So instead of saying, what color lamp can I get? And them saying, hey, dummy, we said white. What I should have said is, what color lamps are available? Because I'd like to find multiple color variations of the light fixture, right? So if I'm constantly thinking of ways to say things twice, it really eases that communication. I see a lot of times, especially clients of ours, and I've done it myself in the past, they get very frustrated by not understanding that they're doing a lot more work than I am. So keep it simple, replicate it, understand that translations are not always immediate, and give them a little benefit of the doubt. And when you learn this, you increase this relationship, potential that you have with these suppliers, and things get a lot smoother for you.
And a lot of things sometimes can get lost in translation, but on our side, not even on their side. Like, for example, if you're from the UK, now if anybody used to watch Manny Coates' old videos, he would always talk about tactical flashlights, right? Tactical flashlights. That was his collagen peptides. I always use collagen peptides as my example. He would use tactical flashlights. But let's say you're trying to source a tactical flashlight and you're from the UK, you might describe it as a torch, but a torch, like let's say that person learned their English from an American program, a torch is like a stick with like a light, like a fire, right? So
like a tactical flamethrower.
You could really go off on the wrong tangent. So again, whenever possible, visually, try to show this. If you're using email or as you saw Alibaba or WeChat, there's an attachment option. So just make sure you're visually showing things, showing pictures, screenshots whenever you can. And like Tim said, just mention it a couple different ways to make sure there's little loss in translation.
All right, another thing about communication. This is like simple human things, but just be polite, be respectful, be professional. Remember that you're trying to find a potential business partner and a supplier. So make sure that you keep things nice and formal, nice and simple. You don't have to go too formal, but just say please and thank you and tell them you appreciate what they're doing for you. That's going to go a long way. Also, I would suggest, we can't really get deep into it in an episode like this, but learn about cultural differences or cultural tendencies wherever you're sourcing, whether it's India or Latin America or China or the Middle East, wherever it is. Because if you understand those cultural tendencies, you'll understand a little bit better of how to communicate. So for instance, in China, there's a problem with the word yes. And I say yes because, there's kind of a communication breakdown on what the word yes means. In China, there's in Mandarin at least, there's 6 or 7 different words that we all consolidate to yes, right? So if we tell them something or we ask them something, there's been situations where I've said, made a statement or asked a question, they said yes. And I thought they were telling me affirmative, but what they were saying was, I understand, right? And also there's some cultural politeness, especially in, more traditional Chinese, where we call it a yes culture. They like to be polite by saying yes. It doesn't always mean yes. So you can understand how some breakdowns would happen there, some miscommunication. So again, the only real way to help fix that is wherever you're sourcing from, just learn a little about the culture. Just Google it. Google cultural tendencies in India, cultural awareness in Vietnam, wherever you're sourcing from. That's going to really help with the communication. And if you're sensitive to those things, it will also go a long way in helping build a relationship with the supplier and kind of building respect from them. So just a few things about communication.
Yeah, and just be patient with them. That's very important. If you're patient with them, they can appreciate that. And don't get frustrated because me, working with customer service here at Helium 10, and sometimes people yelling at me or trying to cuss me out or something, that really doesn't inspire me very much to give my best effort. So keep that in mind too. If you're yelling at them or berating them, I'm not sure that that's really going to get you a long ways in trying to get what you're with what you're hoping for.
Yeah, because that doesn't build a relationship. And the truth is, when it comes to sourcing, relationships matter almost more than anything else. That's why I go to China, is build those relationships. It really helps. When you have a relationship with these suppliers, they're more likely to give you better pricing. They're more likely to kind of bend over backwards to help you. They're more likely to give you information that you want to know. There's frequently suppliers will reach out to me and say, hey, we've got a new product that we see is picking up in Germany, but nobody in the US has bought it yet. They give us inside information. They really help us. So those relationships are massively, massively important. If you treat your potential suppliers the way that you want to be treated, they're going to treat you well too. So don't mess up on this whole relationship aspect and don't think that it's not important, because it absolutely is.
Okay, so now let's say we have sent out all of these RFQs. That was our vocabulary word for the day. And now, we sent out 40, maybe 20 of them give us quotes back. Half of them were right off the bat, we're like, this is absolutely ridiculous. What is the next step after we get these quotes back?
Yeah, so the next step is obviously to look at these quotes. And a lot of times these quotes can be very simple, like an email. And a lot of times in China, they'll actually send you a pro forma invoice. And this invoice, it could be, a little incomplete maybe on, some of the business stuff, like your actual business name. They don't know that. But they'll send you a pro forma invoice, which is basically a quote. So looking at that, I would like to, if we can, pull up the quote that we got back on the coffin box.
Okay.
That I like. Let's pull it up and let's take a look at that and let's kind of talk about it and go through it and show you some of the different aspects and things to pay attention on this. All right, so when we're looking at this invoice, we're looking at the supplier contact information. That's part of the algorithm here. We need to make sure they somewhat look valid and relevant. We'll do a little bit of homework on them. The main thing that we're looking at is the quantity and the price. So they're telling us that they can create 500 units, right, at US dollars, $4.24. That seems pretty good. We'll do some math in a second. But off the top of my head, I remember, our target price for this is going to be over $20, right? Between $20 and $28 or $29.
And this is probably including that packaging that you had requested, since that was on your RFQ.
That was in the RFQ, so we know that the packaging and the sticker is also printed and applied. Now, one thing that's interesting here is, look at this. That's not our product, is it? Well, it's because when they send a quote through Alibaba, which is how we found this supplier, they have to attach a quote to an already existing listing. Now, a lot of people get scared here, and a lot of people say, oh, they're sending me the wrong product. No. Dive a little deeper. We're helping explain how these transactions happen. So what they did is they just used kind of an old listing. That's why, even the dimensions aren't right. But in the product attachments, that picture, guess what it was? It was the black coffin box. But remember, there's still some questions here. Hey, if they don't sell the coffin box, how do we know they can actually make it? The pricing looks good. The MOQ looks good. We don't know who these people are. How do we know if they're valid? So what do?
Ask for a sample.
we ask for a sample. And for the sake of speeding up these episodes, we've actually already asked for a sample, and guess what we have today? Our coffin box, the Manny's Mysterious Oddities coffin shelf. And if you look at this, all we did was ask for a sample from them, and they gave us a price of about, I think it was $100 to create the sample and ship it, which isn't bad for one unit. Remember, they had to design it, but the quality looks decent. It's the matte black paint that we wanted.
Look what I see here.
Yep, we've got our hanger, which we asked for in the RFQ. Basically, everything that we were looking for. So now we know, hey, these folks actually can produce this product. We know that, they should be a legitimate supplier. The size, the dimensions, everything we asked for, we have. So now that we have our product and we have the invoice, we know that, hey, this looks like a pretty good deal.
Sometimes when we get to this point, when we get a quote, there's actually a kind of like a higher level hack I want to share with them. This is something that was from our Elite Mastermind that we first had. If you want to know more about Helium 10 Elite, just look in the show notes. But one of the first times that we launched this was like, let's say we had gotten a quote for like this wooden egg tray, and it came out to something like this. Well, there's this hack on a Chinese website that I think you've used before, 1688.com. A lot of higher level people know about this. And basically it's all 100% in Chinese. It's for the Chinese market. And a lot of times the prices on there are a little bit less even than what you might get from a factory. And so it gives you a little bit of bargaining power. So here's kind of like, in a nutshell, what that process would look like. Let's say you get a contract like we just did right here for the coffin shelf, but let's say it was for the egg trays, and like we see this one right here, it's $4.50, let's just say. So what I would first do, I do not speak Chinese. I would go to translate.google.com and I would say, let me go from English to Chinese. What should I do? Traditional or simplified? Simplified. And I would say wooden egg tray. All right. So I'm assuming that this is a one here. And then now I'm going to go to 1688.com. And as you can see, this website is completely in Chinese. All right. So right up here in the search, I'm going to paste that translation. I don't know what's telling me there. And then hit the button search. And then I start looking here at similar ones. Okay. So then let's say I see one that was exactly like the quote I had gotten for like $4.50 or whatever. And maybe it looks exactly like this. So I'm like, okay, I can't really read, what this is, but I can definitely tell that this is a price 20, what is it called? RMB, yuan, all right? Yep. So let's just say, hey, I'm going to order, a bunch of these, like 500. What is 20? The next step, I'm going to go to xe.com. That's a currency converter. I'm going to say, let's go from Chinese RMB to US dollars, and we're going to do 20. And then it comes out to $2.91. So if this was the exact same one, this is something that you can actually use in your negotiation and say, wait a minute, you're quoting me wholesale here, but here on 1688.com, it's $2.91. Now, this is not to say that you're going to get them to go down to this price, because again, when you talk about packaging and things like that, but it's just a little kind of high level hack I wanted to share with you guys, something that can help you get cheaper prices. We now return to our regularly scheduled program of the coffin shelf. So we got this quote on the coffin shelf. Looks pretty good to us. $424 includes the packaging. We got the sample.
Everything looks good.
What's the next step?
So the next step is we need to find out, based on the cost that we have here, what kind of profitability we're looking at.
All right, so we're here on the coffin shelf page, and let me look at the Sourpuss one here. And I'm going to use the profitability calculator from the Helium 10 Chrome extension. And what this is doing is it's pulling in the information from this listing, all right? Amazon displays what the dimensions are and what the package size is, the weight and all of that thing. And it's just pulling that information in. And so we can see the dimensions. Actually, that's pretty much exactly what our dimensions is going to be. It pulls in the weight. It tells us, hey, this is going to be a large standard size. It pulls in the price. Now, I don't remember what we had said in that last episode about the price. You remember like what kind of range we were going to be in?
Yeah, well, let's just stick with this.
Stick with $25.99?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, remember, this doesn't show the additional shipping that the other listing is with FBM, but we're going to sell FBA, so let's just keep it at $25.99.
Okay, this one right here, it just puts in a default of 1. This basically means how often are you going to turn over your inventory. So you're probably in the beginning not going to be bringing in shipments every single month. So I'm just going to say maybe the first shipment will last us, what, 2 months? 3 months?
We'll say 2 months.
All right, so I'm going to put 2 months right here. And then this here, it puts in just a default 20% of what the retail price is. But this is what we have to do, or what you have to do. You have that quote. So what was that quote? 424?
424, yeah.
We're going to put that right in here. This part here is another one that, again, you have to put in. Basically, it's what your freight is going to be to get it from the factory all the way to Amazon's FBA warehouse. So there's different ways you can calculate that, by cubic meter, by cubic foot, kilogram, pound. It just puts a default 200 by cubic meter. Like, do you think that's good to go to, or do you have a rule of thumb that you use?
So this is one thing in the sourcing section that can hang us up a little bit, because when we're making the decision to buy this product, we don't necessarily know what it's going to cost to ship. And in the next episode, we'll talk more about shipping and logistics. But right now, there's going to be a little bit of a gray area because shipping prices change. We don't know what availability is. So this is why product selection is so important. I see so many people getting hung up on launching a private label product idea because they get to this point and say, I don't know if I'm going to be profitable or not, right? I have no clue. If we're sourcing the right products by using the correct search methods that we're showing you, then the margins are so high that you can afford some wiggle room in here, okay? To my knowledge, there's not a perfect freight calculator. You can't get a quote right now that is always going to be accurate next month. So this is an estimation. This is pretty close. Now, what's interesting is if we leave it at $200 per cubic meter, which might be a little bit low for this because we're only ordering 500 units. So let's just assume that we're 50% off. Let's change it to $300 cubic meter. And again, this would be ocean shipping assumed here. So the unit freight costs $2 per unit. That's probably pretty close. And we go through this.
We got the FBA. Let me go ahead and circle this here. We've got the FBA fee. So this basically includes the 15% that Amazon is going to charge. And we've got other costs. This is where we could put in, like, if we know this is coming from China and we already know that this is going to be, like, let's say 15%, duties or something, I can put a 15% in here, not 150, 15% right here, or whatever the case is. And then now at the bottom, we could see, even with overestimating all of these things, what the estimated profit is.
Yeah, and this is great. And we can play with some numbers here because remember, we don't know all the variables. So let's say that shipping costs are going up. It's right before Chinese New Year, which is something you need to pay attention to. Let's say our cost is going to go up to $400 per cubic meter, which is more than the estimated. Look, we're still profitable. Let's say that we're cranking these things out. We want to raise our price. Let's go up to $29.99. Look, even more profitable. So what we're looking at here is well over 100% ROI potentially. This is great margins. I see so many people that are, doing a lot of revenue, making a lot of sales, but they're really not making any money because their margins are pitiful. But again, the reason that we like these kind of fly under the radar products that we've talked about is because the margins could potentially be high and there's less room for, catastrophic problems. So we have more margin for error by not knowing things like exactly what our shipping costing is going to be right now or exactly what the duty rates are going to be. If the duty rates go up, look, we're still making money.
Yeah.
Now, if we can crank up this volume and get our shipping costs back down to $200 per cubic meter, and we get down to a 10% duty, and we keep our price up there, look, that's really, really profitable. Really, really profitable.
Let me show you guys a quick hack too. That we're at the stage now we haven't placed the order. Maybe we're not locked in completely on the dimensions. So let's say that for whatever reason, the actual package that we were going to do was 9 by 9 by 9. Okay, let's just play devil's advocate right here and just say that was the package that we had gotten a quote on and that we were wanting to do. And then for whatever reason, let's say that the cost was like $9 or something. All right. So then we did this. So like this is what happens, what pulls up when we have the profitability calculator on whatever product we have. It was 9 by 9 by 9, and then we see the unit freight cost is this, and oh my goodness. We only make money from January to September at 54 cents. Now for me, if I saw this, I'm like, all right, cancel. This product is canceled, right? But here's what you can do. Sometimes just by changing a little bit of the dimensions, you can really save. Like for example, look up here, guys. It is saying that this product is only 1 3/4 pounds, but what are they paying shipping? They're paying shipping on if it was 7 pounds because we know that for this size product, Amazon is considering it small oversize, all right? So you might just start playing around here like, okay, 9 by 9 by 9. I'm not married to this exact, size. what if I just change 1 inch on one side? Would that make a difference? Usually you can change 1 inch on one side of a package.
So
right?
on the coffin box, if we had to make it 1 inch shorter, we could.
Yeah. Watch this. I'm going to go 8. It changes it to large standard size. Look at the profit. The profit went from 0 to $5 by changing 1 inch. So keep that in mind too. This is a great tool to use for maybe, since you haven't placed the order yet, it could be something where changing an inch here, changing an inch there, changing the weight a little bit could make a huge impact on the bottom line, where it went from a product that we would have said no to like, hey, $5 profit is doable.
Yeah. So if we're looking at a product and decide, this looks close, but maybe we can adjust some of these sizes and make it more profitable, then we would just go back and ask these suppliers to adjust the size. Say, hey, we got your quote. We appreciate it. Thank you for giving that to us. Can we shave an inch down? Can we do this? Now, what we might have to do is go back through the process again of getting a new sample, because I'm not going to ask them to adjust things without seeing it. You always inspect what you expect, right? And I know sometimes it seems tedious.
I like that.
term?
Inspect what you expect.
Sometimes it seems tedious.
That's some respect for you right there.
Respect, thank you. Seems like things are taking a long time. But as my grandpa used to say, measure twice and cut once. Right?
That is not suspect.
And what that means is, don't try to rush this process. Take your time, because there's too much at stake rushing the sourcing process. If you need to go out and get 6 samples from 6 different suppliers, do that.
Yeah.
If you need to, adjust sizes a couple times, and if this wasn't perfect and I said, I don't like the paint, can you, change the paint and send me another sample? Go ahead and do that, because once you actually basically decide to buy this, you're locked in.
Yeah.
So we know that based on this rough, calculation here, we know that we like the sample. We know that the quote looks good. I think we're going to buy it, right?
Let's do it. So my question would be like, okay, we got all this. We got the quote. Maybe we did some negotiation. Maybe we didn't. Regardless, we're ready to go. Terms, payment types. Like I don't think they maybe some of them have PayPal, but I don't think they have what's those apps like Cash App or Venmo. Like
No.
They don't say, hey, can you Venmo me the purchase order? What are the payment types and payment details, I guess, that you can tell us
Yeah.
about?
It's all over the board. There is not one right way of doing this. I'll tell you the most common. The most common is a bank transfer, wire transfer. It's called TT. You'll see it T/T. This scares a lot of people. A lot of people panic because they find a product on Alibaba and then they want to pay through Alibaba. But remember, we said Alibaba's a phone book, right? So I've had countless customers come to me and say, hey, Tim, I'm worried because they listed their product on Alibaba, but they want a wire transfer. This seems like, kind of sketchy. I say, no. Alibaba is not a sales platform. It is just a phone book. So if they want a wire transfer, that's just a business transaction. Just make sure it looks legit. You can ask around. You can get someone to investigate that for you. But generally speaking, it's legitimate. Now, Alibaba has a second feature. It's very separate. It's kind of like how eBay partnered up with PayPal for payment, processing. And it's called Alipay. Alipay is completely separate than Alibaba as a phone book. Now, some sellers allow Alipay, and Alipay does some cool things. It's got some like protection services maybe built in, kind of like PayPal does that we're familiar with. So Alipay is probably the second most popular. There are some people in China, some factories that do accept PayPal. Sometimes they want you to cover the charges for those. There's a lot of little quirks, but usually wire transfers, Alipay, PayPal, even to personal accounts can be legitimate. Right now, China is trying to, at least in some regions, trying to promote entrepreneurialism, right? They're trying to promote these small businesses, and they give them incentives for having, small cap bank accounts. So I have very good friends in China that have bank accounts that are, have to be tied to them personally. And it looks a little bit hokey when you get this, factory invoice and say, well, send the money to this PayPal person. Some people have gotten scammed in the past, but this is where relationships matter. Talk to them, message them. You maybe can find some resources that can do a little bit of checking up on them. But generally speaking, it's not unusual to have all these different payment options. Just remember, this is a business transaction. Do your due diligence, but don't get, too bent out of shape about something if it looks a little unusual to you, because it just may be something that we're not used to, right? It'd just be new to us. So a lot of different payments, but wire transfers, Alipay, PayPal right now are the 3 biggest. There are some other third-party payment services, but they're a little less common right now.
Okay, now the last thing I want to talk about today, we talked about different specs, respect, suspect, expect. an important process of this is inspect, all right? So how does inspect or inspections play into this sourcing process?
Yeah, well, this ties into what you asked about payment terms, right? You should never pay your supplier 100% up front for these products if they haven't started producing them yet. So generally, these suppliers want a deposit. The two most common are a 30% deposit or a 50% deposit, okay? 30 or 50, with the remaining 70 or 50 being paid when the goods are complete. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make in sourcing is not inspecting what they expect, right? So they pay this deposit, the factory makes the product, and then they pay the remaining balance and get it shipped. And guess what? Sometimes it's not what they expected it to be. All right, the time that you're going to do the inspections is after the goods have been produced and right before you're going to make the final payment. So once they advise you, hey, the goods are done, it's time to get these things shipped, you're going to say, hold on, time out, let's do an inspection first, and then you'll worry about the final transfer. Okay, we're looking at this invoice and we're looking at the price. And one thing we need to talk about is price negotiation. This is kind of a hot topic in this industry, and a lot of people have a lot of different varying opinions on what we can negotiate and what we can't. But imagine this, if you're an Amazon seller selling a $20 item on Amazon and someone's messaging you through Amazon saying, hey, can I get a $1 coupon or can you decrease the price for me? Like, that's kind of a pain in the tail, right? And it's not necessarily worth our time to go through and do that for all that communication. Now, I realize that's one item as compared to what we're talking about, which could be a very large order, but still the same principle applies. One thing that I had to learn when I especially started going to China myself and learning from these suppliers was that they frequently do not really need our business, right? We oftentimes need them more than they need us. And this is a very interesting thing that, kind of a revelation that I had to gain, and I had to gain a little bit of humility. And I see this very frequently not talked about, in this Amazon space or the seller spaces. We think we have the upper hand. We think that we're the buyers, that they're going to give us these great deals and they're going to reduce the price when they might have orders coming in from all over the world and they don't really have time to deal with this. Like we've talked about this coffin box, they gave us a quote for 500 units, but it's only $2,000, right? So they're going to stop their assembly line, retool, reset up, cut the templates and get the paint for only a $2,100 order. They can't have much profit in there. So, I'm looking at this price and I'm thinking to myself, this is fair. I don't want to disrupt this relationship by, trying to barter back and forth on a cheaper price. I'm going to go with this price, right? So when we place this order, we're going to stick with this. Now, later on, as we build a relationship and we're placing larger and larger and larger orders, maybe we can negotiate a little bit lower price. But we definitely don't want to ruin the relationship. We don't want to come off as kind of pain in the butt customers for them, because then we could potentially lose our suppliers. And like when on this coffin box, that was hard to find. There's not a bunch of people lined up making these coffin box shelves, right? It took us some time and some work. And what you can't see is we probably sent out 40 RFQs, and we really only had one that could make us a sample. So just keep that in mind when it comes to negotiation, as long as the pricing is fair. And that's also why we try to get a lot of different quotes to make sure that we're getting a good sampling and pricing. And just keep in mind that cheaper is not always better.
Yeah, and then also just remember too, though, that doesn't mean just take anything that they give you. Like, hey, $10 is what we're going to charge you for this coffin box, but you see it like on that tip we talked about, $16.88 for 5. I don't want to burn the bridge, so I'm just going to keep that. No, if you're getting ripped off, you've also got to be prepared to just walk away, because at the end of the day, that's not profitable. So don't just sacrifice your profit for the relationship, but at the same time, don't sacrifice the relationship for profit.
Yeah, I would say that if the price looks reasonable, stick with it.
All right, guys, today we've shown you how to find and vet suppliers so that you can come to a purchase decision. Now, there's still a lot more to do before we get ready to make our Amazon listing. So in episode 8, what are we going to go over in that one?
Yeah, we're going to talk about shipping and logistics, because now that we're buying the products, we have to talk about all the things included with shipping it, importing it, tariffs, duties, all that. It's going to be a really big episode 8, a lot of good information for you.
Yeah, so guys, make sure to rewatch this episode, because we went over a lot of information. And whatever you still have questions on, if you're watching this when we first broadcast it, remember, every Friday we have an AMA or an Ask Me Anything episode right here on YouTube. So make sure to check that out. There's tons of stuff that a lot of sellers completely just take for granted. They just think they're going to push a button and order and it's going to be there in 2 days, like on Amazon Prime. That's not the case when we're ordering from China. So we're going to go all into that on the next episode. One question I also have for you now, though, is for those of you who have sourced, or those of you who are thinking of sourcing, what's your biggest fear? Maybe is it tariffs? Is it taxes? Is it your shipment getting lost? Is it getting ripped off by the factory? What's your biggest fear? Let us know down below in the comments, and maybe some of those we'll go ahead and bring out on the AMA this Friday. So if you haven't done so already, make sure to sign up for the Helium 10 users group on Facebook. It's completely free. We've got about 20,000 users on there. You can ask them questions. You can also ask any questions about this episode or the other episodes to Tim or myself. Just make sure to tag us, and we will get to it in that group. Last but not least, make sure to hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of the future episodes. And Tim, I guess we'll see you and them on episode 8.
All right, sounds good.